Hi, this is Tilda again, coming in to explain that this was recorded before the 6th of January, when that shit in America went down. So that's why we're not addressing it here. We complain about a whole bunch of other things that seem very trivial when, compared to all that. And who knows what else might have happened by the time this episode gets uploaded. So, I hope you enjoy.
Hi, and welcome to Spectrum Projection, a media review podcast where we analyse characters who may fit into the autism spectrum. I'm Hannah, an actually autistic person with a master's in literature, focusing on the analysis of disability in fiction and in memoir.
And I'm Tilda, and I've got a riddle for you. If I teach a man to fish, then who's driving the boat?
Trigger warnings in the description.
So, what's up?
Happy New Year. Happy 2021.
Yeah.
It's already going about as well as you'd expect. I won't go into details here because this is a public thing, but we didn't get to do very much for Christmas.
Yeah.
Thanks, Boris. Thank you so much for cancelling Christmas 3 days before Christmas Day. Real cool.
Yeah, I don't want to go into any personal details, but let's just say that we celebrated our first Christmas together, and it was alright.
Yeah, it was nice.
We didn't do any presents, because you'd already given me my present, and your present isn't finished, because I'm making something, and then I got depressed.
I mean, yeah, I think we both understood that. It's been a bit of a weird Christmas for most people, I imagine, not just us. But the second the New Year started, my family also got COVID. Everyone's fine as far as we can tell. No one's got a serious case. But literally the first day of 2021. So, great. That's just how this year's going. And to make us feel better, we have been watching some just trash.
Because if there's anything that can make you feel better when you're down, it's some hot garbage that has like little glimpses of something good in it.
Yeah.
But most of it is just trash.
I mean, we don't usually go on these things very much. I say this knowing full well this is how you pitched Star Trek to me, is that it's trash but with good in it somewhere. But, I mean, we've got the Star Trek mention out early for once.
Da-da-da-da-da-da.
But as a side effect of that, we would have watched a specific movie or TV show or maybe even a video game, because I did get a PS5. Don't ask me how much I paid for it.
Don't ask how much you paid for it.
It's what all I can do with my life right now. But there are some ideas for games and stuff I wanted to analyse, but I haven't got around to finishing those games yet.
And we were talking about maybe doing one of the sort of what we kind of calling the big ones, like Forrest Gump. But then we talked about actually watching Forrest Gump, and we were both like, I don't want to watch Forrest Gump.
I'm too sad for this. And Forrest Gump has some weird American politics stuff in it, which we just didn't have the energy for, so that's for later. That's going firmly in the long grass.
Yeah, once the sun has come back a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, maybe when I have more patience for it. When I've stocked up on some really decent chocolate and can make myself sit and focus on it for an hour.
But so what have we been watching?
Well, among other things that are good, we have been watching the 2014 TV show Gotham. And Gotham is the prequel to Batman. Kind of.
It's about the time... Basically, it's about the time between Bruce and Martha. No, what are their names? Martha and
Well,
Batman's
the time
dad?
after Bruce's parents, Martha and no one can ever remember. I think it's Thomas Wayne.
Whatever. They get killed, and then supposedly, we haven't watched the show to the end, so we don't know where it ends. But supposedly until little baby Bruce becomes Batman.
I mean, we are doing this as a bit of a different review. This is more of a initial sort of response to the first season of this show, because I thought it would be interesting, since this character came out the second he came out, I immediately went, oh god, no.
And I've seen, I think maybe like half of this show. I don't remember where I stopped. So I already knew how you were going to respond when this character came up, because I had that reaction when I first saw it, because I was like, oh boy.
Yeah. So we're talking about one of the characters in this, because as it is a prequel to Batman, it's not just about the origin story of Batman, because his parents died. That's basically the whole thing. So it is also partially about backstories of the Batman villains and
other, characters in the Batman universe.
So you see, like, Catwoman as a little girl. That's weird and weirdly voyeuristic, and I'm not entirely on board with it.
I don't know if voyeuristic is the right word, but it's weirdly creepy.
Yeah, it's because Catwoman's character is, the whole thing is that she's sexual and she's being a teenage girl, like a young teenage girl in this story.
And
so
it's not overtly sexual, but there is like weird vibes, like the way they dress her and frame her. I don't want to talk about that because it's like...
It's one of the... Like, this is the thing with the show. It's a show of many parts. I can't even say two halves because that would say there's more good in it than I think I can justify. It's just one particular part of the show that we really love. I'll take two. So the first one is definitely the stuff to do with the mob in this.
So we have basically it's the Penguin's origin story. I feel like there's a bunch of other characters in it that are really interesting, but it's basically the story of how Penguin goes from being a nobody who was going to get, shot at the end of a pier to becoming the king of crime in Gotham or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's delightful. The guy who plays Penguin is just fucking stellar. Delivers such an intriguing performance, and the way he's written where you're never sure if he's like fucked or if this was his plan all along. It's so good. And then you have like one of his, I guess, main antagonists, if antagonist is the right word, who is a invention for the show, who is this... Is she a mob boss or is she like a sort of sub-mob boss at the beginning?
Fish Mooney is one of the senior heads of a family, so she's not the actual in-charge person, but she's as senior as you can be without taking over the entire thing.
Who has her own machinations, and again, amazing character and amazing performance, and like, I love her so much. And you have a bunch of other actors who play mob characters who are all delivering really fun, memorable performances, and it's delightful. Mm-hmm. And then you have what I think they want us to care the most about, which is about Jim Gordon.
Yeah, Jim Gordon, who you would know from Batman as Commissioner Gordon. He's the older guy who gives Batman all his jobs, and then Batman jumps off a roof and ignores him.
Yeah, this whole thing is that he lights the bat light, whatever.
Yeah, he likes the bat signal. That's basically his only job, is that he lights the bat signal, and he's dad to Barbara Gordon, who becomes Batgirl.
So in this show, it's basically him starting at the force in Gotham and realizing that it's all corrupt and, in the pocket of the mob and bad and full of bad people, and he's going to try and clean it up. And I fucking hate him so much because he's so boring in this, and his story is so uninteresting because they don't know how to write crime stories and they don't know how to write characters, and he keeps getting girlfriends even though he knows that basically he's gone into this basically, I am going to paint a target on my back day one, just stand up at the table, hey guys, I'm here to fuck with you. And then I'm going to get a girlfriend and I'm going to keep her in Gotham to make sure that there will always be someone around who can get kidnapped and, threatened. Because I have to get my dick wet. And I hate him.
Yeah, he's... Like,
and it's framed like, he totally loves these women that he, his love interest. But how can he love them when he keeps fucking trying to get them killed?
He keeps intentionally putting them in situations of danger. Mm. But regardless of that, I don't know... I feel like generously you could say it's him trying to learn the lesson that Batman does learn, because Batman doesn't have those kind of connections. I think that's a really weak source reason to constantly have women in peril in this show. Yeah. The treatment of women in this show is garbage.
And and we'll get to that. And then we have the sort of third part of the show, which is basically Bruce and Alfred. One part, not dealing with the trauma of what's happened to them, and also trying to figure out all the fishy stuff that's going on in Wayne Enterprises. And I do love Alfred in this. Great performance, great actor. He's hot.
He's a British icon, because for one, he's the son of one of the Doctor Who, so naturally everyone loves him. He looks so much like that actor. It drives me absolutely mad. He looks so much like John Pertwee, because his name is Sean Pertwee. Uh-huh. And
yes, sure. And also, he's got really nice legs for a man his age. And whatever. But also, the kid who plays Bruce is... very good. Like, I don't know how old he is. He looks pretty young, but he actually does really good portraying, these very complex emotions. And it's not the best part of the show because that's the gangster stuff, but it's definitely good. I mainly like it when it's just about, this, found family thing, because that's my jam. I just love old men who end up in parental figures over children, because I've got grandpa issues, I guess.
I'm just going to interrupt real quick, just as an editor's note. Bruce is played by David Mazouz, and I don't have his age on me, but he was a little bit older than Bruce's character when he was playing it, but I'm afraid I don't have that information in front of me. The Penguin is played by Robin Lord Taylor,
who deserves all the accolades. I think if you're talking about objectively speaking, he is definitely the strongest player in this. The best performance.
Look, I can't overstate how strangely divided this show is. I've never watched anything so distinctly feeling like three completely separate entities just taped together.
Like, I'm not locked into the production, but I feel like it had to be written by different people because, honestly, the crime procedural stuff is so fucking trash, and the gangster stuff is so delightful that it feels like it can't have been written by the same people. And the quality gap is too wide.
And you might be wondering, from all these myriad storylines, from all these different things where we say some are good and some are bad, we have a very clear ranking of what things we really like and what things we think really don't work. What are we talking about? What character jumped out as like autistic representation, which, in case you couldn't guess from how we talked about it, isn't great and is pretty stereotypical.
Fucking mental illness in Batman or superheroes overall being portrayed poorly. You would never. How can you? What?
Yeah, it's one of the really big problems with any kind of portrayal of mental illness in mostly superhero things, but it also happens a lot in kind of general action things, is that asylums are where evil, bad people go, and they're so awful, but it's fine because the people in them are also awful. There's a whole episode set in Arkham Asylum in this series, which, by the way, happened way too early on for it to feel at all justified. But
there are many more down the line, and it's going to get wild and stupid, and some of it is going to be enjoyable, kind of. I mean, you'll see.
I mean, it does go into a lot of the kind of therapies and things that people have done in the past and in some places still do. To people with things like autism or with any other kind of mental illness, there's a whole plotline about electroshock therapy. So if you are not comfortable with, asylum imagery and like abuse of a medical nature,
don't watch this show.
Don't watch this show because it's not even remotely insightful about it. I mean, it kind of annoys me because as a concept, you'd think that it's something they would talk about, and they bring it up in passing that the asylum doesn't work, the asylum's really outdated, all it does is hurt people. But then they never actually engage with that idea on any level.
Because they do want the sort of edgy Arkham Asylum thing, because that's what people remember from Batman.
So that is a problem, but who we're talking about isn't someone from the asylum. It's someone who works at the police station, which is already not a great sign because most of the storylines that happen there are incredibly by the numbers cop procedural stuff that's done less than intelligently. And there's one character in the police precinct who we like, who's Jim Gordon's partner.
What's his name?
Harvey. He's
just, again, because he's like basically the bad cop to Jimmy Gordon's goody two-shoes cop. And again, this actor delivers a great performance. He's a piece of shit, but he's likable. He reminds me of Quark from Deep Space Nine, Star Trek or whatever. He's just, you can't not love him because he's very honest about what kind of person he is, and which is a piece of shit.
Yeah, one of the things I like about that is he interacts with the person we're talking about. This, we keep getting to it, but we keep getting sidetracked by the characters because there is so much stuff in this show. If you don't know Batman stuff, I imagine it's a very strange ride.
It is. I mean, I don't know a lot of Batman stuff, and I've watched several seasons of this.
Basically, in the precinct, there is somebody who is a crime scene investigator who's not a mortician, but acts like he is someone who inspects dead bodies.
Because he just can't help himself.
And his name is Edward Nigma.
Nigma?
Nigma Balls. It's so dumb. I hate his name. I know it's from the comics. I hate it. Edward Nigma. Nigma.
What?
I know. What a twist.
Wait, what?
His name is Nigma, which means, a riddle. Because this is the person who becomes the villain, the Riddler. And you might be wondering, if you've never seen Batman...
I'm raising my hand even though this is an audio medium. Can we talk about how this show has no fucking restraint whatsoever? Like, anytime they introduce a character, they have to, in the first two lines, make absolutely sure that you know who this is. So the first time we see Mr. Nigma, he walks and says, "Hey guys, do you want to hear a riddle? Would you like to hear a riddle?"
And he stares at the camera. It's
not literally, but it's as bad as that. And it's
there is a pause of a couple seconds so people can try and figure out. Oh yeah, you mean I get it.
And throughout the entire show, constant stuff. I think at one point he has a mug with a question mark on it.
He sure does.
And then it's the same with all the characters. Penguin,
I would argue, is the only one who doesn't. But again, it is Robin's performance.
Yeah, but they still do that thing where someone calls him Penguin and it's I don't like that nickname.
Yeah.
And it's well, tough kiddo, because And Jim Gordon being introduced, everyone introducing themselves by their full name, no matter the context, just to make absolutely sure that you know who they are.
If you think there's going to be a slow build to what these characters are, no, not at all. They've got to give you it every episode, every single time. When you meet Two-Face, he's literally half in shadow, half in light, and he's flipping a coin.
Do you get it?
It's the most overdone. But if you're not sure who the Riddler is, because we're going to be talking about him in a bit more depth, the Riddler is one of the very old-style villains from Batman. He's one of the rogues gallery, but he's one of the ones that's kind of shit. And I think that's kind of why people love him. His whole deal is not like the Joker, where he's got this whole like big ethos behind him that people have created. The Riddler's thing is that he makes puzzles, and Batman's really smart and solves them, and then manages to save whoever Riddler's kidnapped or whatever. And then the Riddler gets mad that Batman solved the puzzle he made.
You basically just want detention for being smart.
Yeah, it's a very strange thing, and depending on what version of it, most versions don't bother giving him a backstory because he's the fucking Riddler. He doesn't need one. It's the Riddler. Like, what do we need to know? Nothing. And
but
like
this show does, because this is an origin story.
And people like the Riddler, and he's not in very many adaptations. He's been in one Batman film in all time, if you don't count animated ones, and it was the really shit one that no one likes. So he was played by Jim Carrey then, which was a weird choice, and I didn't get it. But the Riddler is a very eccentric character, and eccentricity is often kind of used as a shorthand for autistic behaviour. Like, being an eccentric in the Victorian era is very often believed to be a way that people would describe someone who is autistic, because their behaviour is unusual. Riddler is very much the stereotype of the autistic villain, which you'd be surprised how frequently it comes up, and there's a lot of things that happen to him in this storyline that like make me think of him as an autistic person who got pushed too far by everyone else being a dick about it, but then they just completely go off the rails with what that means.
Yeah, and it's like, this show is strange, because for a lot of it, it feels like we're supposed to be sympathetic to it, even though they are, to him, I mean, even though they are very clearly dropping hints that this guy is like 2 bad days away from snapping and going on a serial killer spree.
I mean, the first thing they do to try and like set up that he's weird is that he doesn't understand conversations very well. Like, 4 or 5 episodes very early on will start with somebody posing a question to him and him taking it literally, and then them being like, oh, I don't actually care.
Yeah.
And I need to give that fucking thing a name. I need to give it a trope name or just a cultural name, because it happens so often in these shows. It's constant with Data. Data is the worst example of it. I know we always talk about him, but this is literally something that was so prominent that it made us dislike characters in Next Gen, because people kept saying things. Data would respond accurately to the thing they said, like, oh, can you explain this? And he'll go into detail, and they'll say, I don't actually want to know all that detail.
Or they will interrupt him, and it's, yeah. You know what? I think that's it. That, like, there are so many characters in Star Trek Next Gen that I'm like, how does anyone like this person? And then I realize, oh no, it's because they're mean to Data sometimes.
And in Gotham...
That I hate them, I mean.
But in Gotham, because we know Riddler is a bad person, because of course we know this is going to be the Riddler, whenever someone's kind of a dick to him, I don't think we're supposed to feel bad for him, really. It's very hard to know what they're asking us to feel towards the Riddler in this show.
Yeah, that's it. Or if we are supposed to feel bad for him, it's like, I can't, because... I want to get into it, because this is like one of the first things I noted when I watched the show the first time is Nigma is into this girl who works at the precinct. She's like a secretary.
Her name's Miss Kringle. He keeps calling her Miss Kringle instead of her actual full name, which I think is literally like Christian Kringle. It's
because
like
superhero stuff is stupid.
Superhero names are so fucking stupid. J. Jonah Jameson is the dumbest name.
Yeah, but he has a crush on her, and he keeps, approaching her, even though she's dropping very clear hints that she's not interested, and he doesn't, get it and notice, and he keeps, overstepping her boundaries. She asks him not. He asks to resort her filing system, and she's like, no, I have it the way I like it, and he just does it anyway, and she doesn't understand when she gets mad at him. And again, I feel like in those instances, we're supposed to feel sorry for him, but all the time I'm just thinking about the way that he's being played and the way they're shooting this. I said this in their first interaction. I had no idea where the show was going to go, but the first interaction, I said to myself, he's 100% going to end up killing her. And spoilers, he does. And that was their first scene together. And then they have all these scenes where we're supposed to feel sympathy for him. And it's very confusing, because all the time I'm thinking, like, why do you want me to feel sorry for the future girlfriend murderer?
I mean, I do want to say, I don't think it's the actor's fault necessarily. It's just not... They've clearly told him you're playing a villain.
Yeah.
And, like, he does try and lean into that kind of creepy edge with it. But the script they've given him, it's really unclear if the script wants us to feel sorry for him or wants this to be considered, like, a empathetic backstory. But it's really not. Like, he just doesn't get his way all the time, and that's enough for him to snap.
I think that is it. Like, it's supposed to be an empathetic backstory, but, like, I'm sorry, I don't feel sympathy for, you know, nice guys who gets quote-unquote friend-zoned. I don't think that's an adequate motivation for becoming a murderer. Controversial opinion.
The actor Corey Michael Smith does a really great job with the character. Like, he does play that vibe of someone who is very awkward and not sure how to act well. Yeah. But it does really perpetuate that annoying stereotype of, like, there are definitely people who are autistic who don't understand the boundaries. That happens. But if someone has explicitly said to him 5 times, I'm not interested, please stop trying to, like, make a move on me, he would know that. He can't keep playing the card of, but I don't get it. Like, I understand wanting to woo her, but he just keeps coming up with flowers, like, 4 separate times when she's talking to her current boyfriend.
Or edible arrangements.
Yeah.
It's just a watermelon that has, like, a bunch of watermelon balls in it. Also, obviously, all her boyfriends are, like, shitty, abusive people because we need him to look good in comparison. But again, how can he look good in comparison when I know from, you know, being able to read what's on the screen that he will definitely kill her? Like,
even if you don't assume that, which it's very hard not to because he's doing all the possessive behavior stuff, like, you know, he's the Riddler. So he's going to turn out to be an evil person no matter what happens. Like, even if he doesn't kill her, he's going to be an evil person. And we know that Kristen Kringle isn't in main Batman, so this is all a waste of time.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a problem with prequel stuff, is that you know it's never going to go anywhere. Yeah. So it completely stops any sense of progression dead because you know where it's going to go and you know all of this is useless and pointless. But basically, he pursues her while she's dating this bent cop in the middle of another plotline, because he is very much a C-plot kind of character at this point in the story.
Yeah.
Like, his segments in each episode last maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's basically just individual vignettes dispersed between the actual plot of the episode.
He wants to be the medical examiner. He's not. And he gets in trouble for constantly, you know, desecrating bodies by examining them when it's not his job to do that. And he does a lot of that quirky medical whatever stuff. So, you know, the whole... You've seen it with many other autistic co-detectives where it's like, they'll touch blood and lick it to see if it's blood. And they'll, like, make all sorts of weird actions with the body to be able to tell that it's done something or whatever. And the real medical examiner kicks him out and gets really mad at him. So Nigma does the same thing of just chopping up a bunch of cadavers that are in the morgue and hiding them in the guy's, like, locker.
And when he opens it, it all falls out, and the people who see him, for some reason, just immediately assume, oh, you were hiding all those body parts. Instead of the most logical thing is, dude, horrifying, someone put a lot of body parts in your locker. So he gets fired, and for that somehow means that Nigma is now the medical examiner.
Except he's not. Because it's literally just a plot convenience for someone else to be the medical examiner, because that's Jim Gordon's new girlfriend who becomes the medical examiner.
Who he picked up from another plot that I don't want to bother talking about.
No. And it's like, then Edward drops all interest in that role. And it's like, did you want to be it? Or did you, like, what? No motivations are clear for him. And the thing is with obsessive behavior, it's like...
The girlfriend doesn't chase him out of the morgue, so...
Yeah, the girlfriend doesn't yell at him for doing body examinations and stuff. I think that's literally it. But the thing is with obsessive behavior is, like, it is supposed to be about something. It's not just they act weird for the sake of acting weird. And he keeps giving Kristen all these very, like, gruesome gifts as well. Like, at one point he gives her a cupcake with a bullet in it, and it's a riddle. And it's like, hun...
That's a threat!
Yeah.
How can you not realise that?
She calls it menacing, weird, and inedible. And you know what? She's not wrong.
Yeah.
Like, her character is nothing. And I say this with all the goodwill in the world to the actress as well. But her character is the most prop for the sake of the story I've ever seen.
Again, it's almost like they knew already that they were going to kill her. Except, you know, they only managed to write 1.5 good female characters in the rest of the show. So maybe we're not supposed to notice that she will definitely die.
He apparently, the riddle related to the cupcake was, a beautiful woman is a dangerous thing. Awful riddle. Riddles he gives in this show, very poor quality.
It's like, we're gonna out ourselves as Bim Bum fans. From the podcast My Brother and Me, where they have a segment called Riddle Me Piss, and it's just about looking up terrible riddles on this website.
Yeah, on riddles.com. And like
It's that level.
I would say that Riddlers aren't quite that level because at least his are riddles, but they're all riddles that you would hear in like a Christmas cracker. It's like what's black and white and red all over? A newspaper. What has two hands and never moves? A clock. It's all stuff that's like baby's first riddle book.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you can't like have him build up to like complicated riddles and stuff, but he's supposed to be a riddle enthusiast. He wouldn't be going for this stuff. If you like riddles, by the way, listen to the podcast Hey Riddle Riddle, which is actually about real riddles. It's not about dumb, terrible ones.
Of course you listen to a podcast that's about riddles.
Hey!
It's very on brand for you, is what I'm saying.
I'm the Riddler. It was me all along.
And speaking of on brand, I listen to a podcast about so that's the duality of man.
To my parents who listen to this podcast.
Oh shit! I realized that maybe my parents will listen to this too. Oh,
maybe we'll just put a bleep over that. And I listen to a podcast about bees.
I feel like that's gonna make it worse. Oh, we'll decide in post.
We'll decide in post. If you're hearing this, we decided it was a good idea somehow. For some reason, there's a weird like constant undercurrent of misogyny in every single character in this show. And I don't just mean the villains. I just mean everyone kind of hates women just a little bit. And with Riddler being obsessed with this woman who we see no reason why he has any connection to her at all, he's not capable of holding a conversation with her without her basically calling him a weirdo and storming out. The beautiful woman is a dangerous thing. It's like every single villain's motivation can be boiled down to they hate women. And like, I don't think they even know they're doing it is the problem. Like...
I guess even Penguin technically, because he hates Fish Mooney, but he doesn't hate her because he's a woman. He hates her as a person.
But he also does have weird things with his mother.
Yep.
So, you know, it's... No one's in a good place. But at this point when he gives her this cupcake, she's dating another detective. And yes, he is an asshole. He turns out to be someone who's, like, completely corrupt and Gordon puts him away later. But, like, he comes in and starts, like, telling him to back off. And Riddler takes that as, like, a threat to him. And it's like, dude, she's not interested. She is not interested. Like, as much as I can understand the whole can't read social cues, I can't make it clear enough that, like, if you're explicitly told something, you do understand it. Like, I can be explicitly told, hey, you're kind of being a lot right now and not have realised, but after that point, I will be aware of that.
And there's one point when he overhears, like, Kringle and a bunch of, you know, cops hanging out and talking, and they talk about how weird and off-putting he is. And, again, the way it's shot, it's like, oh, we're supposed to feel sorry for him. But all I can think is, and he still doesn't back off after that?
The way Riddler talks is also very autistic coded. Like, it's a lot of, like, extreme specificity of language. Like, he says stuff like, I'm surgically removing the onions from this takeaway or whatever. Like, he speaks with a very specific...
Slightly nasally as well. Yeah,
and vocabulary that's, like, overly complex, which is a trait in a lot of autistically coded characters, like Arbed from Community and Sheldon from Big Bang Theory. Like, there's a tendency to be, like, overly eloquent to make up for the fact that they're not very confident with speaking. And that is true. Like, it's very much... true for me, at least. Like, I have been known to just kind of go to overly wordy explanations. You might know from us starting a podcast of me explaining this stuff. Basically, his whole behaviour is very strange. Like, he writes a poem to her about how much he likes her, and then the cops find it and make fun of him for that. And it's like, you shouldn't be sending a poem to a woman who's A, not interested in B, dating someone else. Like,
especially someone, this is on you, my guy.
Especially someone who he is aware of being a domestic abuser.
Is that the one who... Because I think that her first boyfriend, it's never made clear that he's abusive. But the second one, it's made clear because Nigma walks up to him and like, hey, you shouldn't hit her because that's bad.
No, it's the second one who's physically abusive. The first one's just an asshole. Basically, he tries to ask her out, but she cuts him off after saying the card was kind of thoughtful. She cuts him off and says, I'm gonna go now. And he decides that means there's hope. And I don't like this coding being so prevalent, but also him being such a fucking incel creep. Because those two things are not, you know, they're not hand in hand always going to happen. It's just completely bullshit.
Do we want to talk about his turn? Like, his, like, when he goes proper off the rails?
Yeah.
'Cause I think that's worth talking about. So it's her second boyfriend. She's on the second one. And Nigma has confronted him and be like, hey... you shouldn't be abusive. And this cop is like,
fucking make
you're a little bitch, fuck you.
He literally does about 1 degree less nerdy Back to the Future. Get your damn dirty hands off her.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? And the cop is like, what are you gonna do about it, huh? Yeah, that's what I thought, you little nerd. Nothing. And so, Nigma confronts him out in the street outside his apartment, I think, in the middle of the night, and really cartoonishly and loudly stabs him to death.
In a public road.
And in a very unriddly way. Like, straight up just like stab, 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 stab several times.
Yeah, it's not...
And then he laughs about it.
It's not Riddler at all, because it's not even a premeditated murder. Like, it just happens in the spur of the moment, as far as we can tell. Which is not a very Riddler way of doing fucking anything.
Yeah.
Like, that's the other thing that really gets to me, is like, as much as they keep desperately saying, this is the Riddler, he hasn't really done anything that makes him seem like the Riddler other than talk about riddles sometimes.
And disposing of a body in the most over-the-top way possible.
Like, he takes the boyfriend's body back to the morgue at the police
in 2
station.
suitcases, because obviously he chopped it off beforehand, because he is crazy. And then he puts it in the sink in the morgue and I think pours acid over it or something.
Yeah, he pours acid over it just to disintegrate it as much as possible, and then he starts playing with the skull like
The
it's...
very clean, beautifully preserved skull. And then he writes, he's like, I need to cover my tracks, so I'm going to write a note to Kringle where he's like, I'm leaving town, have fun, bye forever. And then he writes the note, typewriter note, because but this show is very confusing in what era it takes place, because they have flip phones, but also everyone is dressed like it's the 40s and they all have typewriters apparently.
And the entire city looks like it's part of a like 1800s Gothic nightmare made of steel. So it's all a very strange mishmash of periods. Also, the lighting in this show is fucking bizarre. I need to say it because it drove me nuts. Every scene has so much lighting, and it like makes no sense.
Outside every building, there is just like the apocalypse level of light. It's
and
hilarious.
every club has 80 chandeliers,
and it's just smoke everywhere. It's a fascinating set design. But anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, he writes a note on a typewriter, and he writes it so that the first letter of each line lines up to write Nigma, because he wants her to figure out that he killed him, or he wants to, I guess, subconsciously influence her to go for him afterwards, or he just can't help himself because he's gone total split personality
riddle crazy
cuckoo pops now. Yeah. It's very dumb.
Kristen does walk in and see the corpse of her boyfriend at one point, but because it's so disfigured, she doesn't recognize it and just gets grossed out.
Oh, what happened to that guy? And he's like, accident. He had an accident on a saw form. Bzz, bzz.
Oh, God. And he says, like, you have to have a sense of humor about these things. Ha ha ha.
No, because she says, I don't know how you can stand working with this stuff.
Yeah, and he's like, you have to have a sense of humor about these things to get through it. And it's just like, this is my main kind of core point about these kind of villain autistic coded characters, is that it really often comes back to this like low natural empathy thing. And that is present in a lot of autistic people, along with like far too high empathy, and both suck in very different ways that are like personally painful. But being low empathy does not make you automatically someone who's going to snap one day and murder someone. Like, you can be low empathy and still work hard on sympathy. Like, just because it doesn't come naturally to you doesn't mean you're always gonna just snap one day. Like, the implication...
it doesn't like really have any effect on your level of selfishness, I don't think.
Oh, no.
People with a lot of empathy can also be selfish, and people with low empathy can be very selfless.
Like, it's very much a thing people have to be aware of and have to, like, consciously work on it. I'm not saying it's easy at all. Like, I know people who have naturally low empathy and make a lot of effort to try and get past that. And don't ever have these kind of like, I'm having dark thoughts type stuff.
Because that's a different thing. That's a completely different thing.
Like, Riddler literally has a moment where he starts doing the stereotypical I'm going crazy stuff, where like the screen starts flickering and he's like...
And it's like, different
faces.
shapes, like, fading in and out of different shots, and they keep cutting from him to him as he's having this conversation with himself with these two personalities. Because now he's got like the evil Riddle personality, and we got the nerdy, submissive Nigma personality, and they're like talking to each other, and their evil personality is like, well, you know what they say, women need a steady hand, so you should be violent with her, or something like that.
Like, he repeats something that one of her earlier boyfriends said, which was like, with girls like her, you need to use a firm hand or something like that. And it's like, this is not autism anymore. This is just generic crazy that you've picked out of a hat.
Which is just what Batman as a franchise peddles in a lot.
Yeah,
crazy is very much like a blanket term that can cover any number of incoherent behavior.
Like, it seems to really just grab by the fistful random aspects of bipolar and random aspects of, I think, what's it called now? Not multiple personality disorder. Any kind of illness that seems even slightly away from the norm, it'll just grab whatever parts of that sound interesting and compelling to a narrative and just throw them at the screen. And this show does very, very little with that and just continues with the same exact thing they've been doing with that for a really long time, which is to pretend it's just real creepy and scary and that there's nothing that can be done, when objectively there is something that can be done. You can get these people help. But, you know, that doesn't make a good story.
Again, spoilers, but later in the show they do... I remember this because I watched a video where someone brought it up. It's immoral and fucked up, but one character does pretty much completely cure Penguin's violent tendencies and turn him into a complete doormat who will put up with nearly anything. And they never bring up the fact that they have a cure for violent psychopathy.
Yeah.
So they could, like all of these villains, if they just put them in this chair and had them undergo this, albeit terrible procedure, they would just be law-abiding citizens who wouldn't hurt a fly unless that fly had murdered their long-lost dad and abused them for, you know, but whatever, it doesn't. But yeah, but apparently nothing can be done. These people are just crazy.
Yeah, and the problem is with lumping together mental illnesses like this, it makes people coming to terms with their own potential disorders or mental illnesses way harder because they all seem the same level of dangerous and terrifying, whereas autism is not dangerous. And honestly, no mental illness is inherently dangerous. You can literally be someone who is having hallucinations or believes that they are someone who is going to harm people, but that doesn't mean that they are inherently dangerous. It just means they need help. And for this show, there's so many directions that we've been talking about, like what they could have done, what they maybe should have done. Like, for one, I think all the Riddler stuff is really boringly done because it's so predictable and so overdone. Like you said, if you don't guess that he's going to kill this girl, but the point where he goes crazy, he starts talking about having to be violent with her, so it's like, yeah, he's gonna kill her. It's really boring, for one, as well as massively insensitive. Like, if it's anything to do with domestic abuse stuff, it's like very kind of implying that this woman just goes to domestic abuses on purpose.
Yeah,
it's bizarre. Like, no.
Women, am I right?
Like I said, with the misogyny being everywhere. And like, the thing is, I have dabbled in a few different Batman things, and I do like Riddler in other properties. I like Riddler in the Batman animated series. I like Riddler in the Arkham games. Like, that personality doesn't surprise me in the same way this one does, because it's supposed to be him before he turns, and apparently all he did was be vaguely autistic, and, you know, that was enough.
Yeah.
It's bad. It's strange. And I was talking about how it would have been a really interesting subversion if they'd made Christian. I need to say Christian Mingle.
That would be a subversion. I would be very surprised.
Kristen Kringle, if she had turned out to be the Riddler, like, it would have been so much more interesting if they just, like, twisted it.
Like, Hannah keeps doing this thing when we're watching this show that I fucking hate, where she keeps coming up with better ways to do whatever plot they're doing, just so I can be even more disappointed in the show.
But yeah, my whole point was, like, if you just have him be this guy who means well, who can't read situations very easily, who's in a job that where people don't, you know, like him and don't treat him well, and he tries to stand up for this woman who, you know, has an abusive boyfriend, who then, you know, does as abusive boyfriends do and, like, kills Edward, and then for her to, like, obsess over him and, like, what this riddle he gave her or something, and have it, like, serve as a motivation for her to become the Riddler. Like, that would have been a lot more interesting. I mean, they definitely had time to flesh it out over 5 seasons, and, like, just because it is Batman doesn't mean you have to do it the exact way everyone's expecting.
Because there were, you know, a billion alternate universes of every single superhero thing, so... And again, you've already invented characters like Fish Mooney, and so why stop there?
Like, my point is, if you look at something like Spider-Verse, they can use the fact that everybody already knows exactly where this is supposed to go to make very small changes that do genuinely throw you for a loop. Like, there's a character change in Spider-Verse. I'm not spoiling it because genuinely, if you haven't seen Spider-Verse, you absolutely have to. It's one of my favourite films of all time.
It's such a good movie. It's easily, like, I'm gonna say it. Best superhero movie I've seen.
Oh, absolutely.
Probably the best one ever.
Absolutely. Like
I can't say the best one ever because I don't fucking watch Marvel movies.
I mean, I
or
used to be up to date
DC
on them.
movies either, to be fair.
I used to be up to date to them, and to be honest, the only other movies that I've come close to enjoying have been the Spider-Man ones, and like they make a change to certain characters in Spider-Verse that you don't expect, like that they don't talk about in any trailers or anything, and it genuinely is so shocking that it feels like electric when it happens. Like you feel like, oh my god, this all makes sense. And I feel like they really had that opportunity with this because no one really gives a shit about half of these villains. Like people know who Poison Ivy is, people know who Catwoman is. People don't really give a shit about Riddler. Like people kind of give a shit about Penguin, but again, they've managed to hit a home run with Penguin's character in this one somehow. But, like, they could have done something different. If you're gonna do the weird side villains, like goddamn Balloon Man or whatever, just do whatever the hell you want.
To be fair to this show, the Balloon Man arc was fucking hysterically funny, and it was the thing that sold me on the show. Because that's like early episodes where they're trying to do a serious procedural cop drama about a criminal that ties fucking rich fuckers to weather balloons and sends them flying into the sky. It's gold. It's peak TV. It's good. I love it so much.
It's just fun. Like, I think where the show does work is when it realizes it's a supervillain thing, so they can just go crazy.
So much of the gangster stuff is that it's like it feels like it's using the full potential of, oh yeah, this is the Godfather, but in a universe where some people can throw fire. There's never any fire throwing things, but it's just the fucking gangster drama is so balls to the walls crazy that it's so entertaining, and I love it so much, and I wish that was the whole show.
Like, I kind of wish there was an edit of the show that was just the mobster stuff. Unfortunately, it does engage with the police stuff way too often. And I will say it's very strange viewing now, post Black Lives Matter protests and everything, to watch this show about a police department that's corrupt, and for them to be like, isn't this the worst police department in the world? And all the things they do are like, yeah, but those things happen in real police departments all over the world.
Like, we're supposed to buy that Gotham is especially bad when, from what we keep finding out, this is just operations as usual.
Like, yeah, Gotham is exaggerated. There's a lot of, like, you know, police officers getting into bare knuckle like fist fights with witnesses or whatever, but like
like they're like beating the shit out of people like right there in the precinct in
like
the office,
like bribing people to give statements or whatever. But it's like that's really not that different to what actually happens. And so like a lot of the things I try and say, it's just like, yeah, you gotta fucking you gotta burn the entire thing down, man. It's not gonna work from you in the inside. I don't know why you keep pretending it will.
Mr. fucking Jim Gordon and incremental changes, man.
He's big on, I can talk to the big mafia man, and then if I ask him nicely enough, he'll stop being corrupt. And so, why do you never learn that this won't work?
Yeah.
Like, he never learns. And the thing is, like, him and Harvey, his partner, are supposed to be really good detectives, but they both take no notice of Edward Nigma, and they don't seem to notice that he's genuinely unhinged and will hurt someone in front of them. Like, they are the worst at like spot checks for anything.
Also, side point, they keep walking into traps constantly, and I wish they had played it like they are kind of idiots, because that would be so much more entertaining. And on occasion they have a great dynamic when it's, you know, Jimmy Gordon, like goody, like unfathomable goody two shoes idiot moron, and Harvey, who is like a slob and kind of a little bit of a lech, but also corrupt, but also like a realist who can be like, hey, no.
He's the sloppiest man alive, but he is alive. So yeah, you can take that as a win.
There's like a very good interaction they have in the beginning of the show where Jim Gordon calls him, what is it?
Lackadaisical.
Lackadaisical, and Harvey just goes, lackadaisical? Like, in that tone of voice, like, did you just actually say that word out loud? And if that was all of it, all of their interactions and all of like Jim Gordon's presence in the show, it would be gold. It would be great. But instead we have to waste a lot of time on his worthless romances with the most underwritten, uninteresting female characters ever put to TV, I swear to God.
Like, it's more than that as well, because it keeps getting bigger with the problems, because like I don't think it's possible to fix the way they talk about mental health in this universe.
No.
It's just too baked into the fabric of it that it's not being dealt with well. And the worst part is that they are doing it well in some areas. Like, if you look at the Bruce Wayne storyline and him, if you don't know the story of Batman, Bruce Wayne's parents are dead and he's now being raised by his butler, Alfred.
Butler dad.
Butler dad. Alfred is like an old British, like, was in the army, very stiff upper lip. And the whole thing is you can see that he is passing on these terrible, hyper-masculine ways of not dealing with emotional issues to Bruce.
But are we supposed to think they're terrible, or are we supposed to think that this is sound advice on how to deal with your problems?
Other problem with the show is it doesn't seem to be very clear on which one of those things is true.
Because, like, either way, it does work from a story perspective, because they have a sweet dynamic, and you can tell that they care about each other very deeply. And you understand, like, how it's not necessarily gonna help Bruce be healthy, but it's sure as hell gonna make him be Batman at some point.
And that's what we're here for, after all.
And I love Alfred, and I don't want to be mean about it.
I mean, I have seen people... This is another thing I wanted to talk about. I guess this is a good place as any to talk about it. There are a lot of characters that people bring up as autistic that I've seen as suggestions. Stuff like Zuko from Avatar, and stuff like Bruce in this. And I am very hesitant to kind of make those reads for characters who've been through, like, intense personal trauma, because there is an implication that trauma causes this, and that's not how autism works. Things don't cause autism in that way. Like, as far as we understand autism, people are just born autistic or not, and we don't think there is any kind of pinned down cause.
It's not because they drink a lot of milk or whatever one of the trendy ones is.
Yeah, whatever the trendy thing is. As much as I do like looking at Bruce's character, like, he's like very fixated behavior, and he has like a very strict sense of like what he needs to do when, and like how to get through his day and everything, but like that's very much a trauma response in this, and they're very clear about that.
Yeah.
Like, it's very much a thing he developed in response to losing both his parents, and he goes on to make some truly, truly terrible decisions. He wouldn't be Batman if he did nothing but make terrible decisions. Oh, man. Bruce. I mean, I feel like I said, there's no real way to fix this show, and I don't know, for our wrap up, like, I don't think I can recommend this show on any level other than if you want to watch some trash while you're eating your dinner, if you want to watch something that requires no thought.
If you want to be taken on a roller coaster ride of quality, where from one scene you're having the time of your life and you're enjoying every second, to the next scene forcing a guttural, pained groan out of you because you cut from the best part to the worst part of the show, it makes you feel alive.
It's genuinely a quality whiplash I've never felt scene to scene before. Like, most of the time, like when we talked about how much Sherlock sucks, like, it's a fairly consistent meh quality in meh episodes, and a very consistent awful quality in awful episodes. Whereas Gotham, I would say my favourite episode is also my least favourite episode, because all the bits that involve the mob are super interesting, but all the bits to do with, like, the serial killer who hates women are just boring, not interesting.
The Fish Mooney's Doll Island, or whatever you call it, arc is some of the best TV. And I mean that unironically, like, not even like so bad it's good, it's so fucking good.
Jada Pinkett Smith knocks that role out of the park.
She is just so amazing. And Fish Mooney is such a good character, and it's like, how could people who came up with that character also write this Jim Gordon man to be the most frustratingly boring creature on the planet?
And how did they also write the Riddler's backstory to be so fucking predictable and by the numbers?
How can every second Penguin is on screen, whether he's winning or, you know, about to be crushed to death in a car, be fucking like, I'm on cloud nine, I'm so entertained, and then it's just fucking Jim Gordon and his dumb girlfriend drama, where they just keep having the same conversation, which is like, why don't you tell me things? And he's like, because I can't, because I'm a cop trying to, you know, clean up this force, but also I'm definitely gonna still pursuing this relationship with you, even though, you know, I'm putting you in danger. And she's like, I've lived in Gotham my whole life and I don't understand what you're talking about.
It's like,
what do you mean this city's dangerous?
Meanwhile, you look at Gotham and it's like there's 80 different bank robberies every 5 seconds. Like, how does anyone live there?
How does anyone live here? But also, how does anyone live here and not fucking always carry a knife with them and always, watch their back. Like, it's...
Like, it's a bizarre
See, I will
situation.
recommend this show because, again, it will make you feel emotions that no other show will ever make you feel.
You're very much rolling the dice every time you watch it. Cause,
Yes, it's exhilarating.
it's a genuine gamble whether you'll get something that's incredibly entertaining or, unfortunately, the police stuff isn't even, like, bad enough to make fun of all the time. A lot of the time it's just boring. If you like crime procedurals, there are 80,000 other ones that are better that you can watch. Watch Elementary, it's really good. But, like, there's no benefit to that. And honestly, like, half the problem is because of the nature of the prequel. Because we know where all these characters are going to end up. We know that Penguin is going to be the boss of everything one day. We know that Batman is going to be what Bruce Wayne becomes. We know that Jim Gordon's going to be useless and call
Not
Batman.
accomplish anything.
He's going to call Batman every time anything happens, which means he's not an interesting protagonist by his very nature.
Yeah.
Because even in normal Batman stories where we already know him, all he does is press a button to turn on a light that gets Batman to do his job for him.
And look tired.
Yeah. That's basically it.
But see, like, the Penguin stuff, even though you know where he's gonna end up, I still find it enjoyable because he literally starts, like, down in the dirt and he keeps falling into the dirt. He keeps fucking up and ending up at, like, basically square one and almost getting himself killed. But somehow he always survives, and occasionally he just turns around to you and sees... you think I fucked up, but this was actually my plan the whole time, and you believe it, and it's...
Fish Mooney does the same thing, and it's genuinely the most compelling thing about it. There's genuinely moments where you're like, oh yeah, she's saying she's doing this, but like, I couldn't tell you if this motivation is genuine.
Oh yeah, there are so many times when she's portraying like, oh, I'm genuinely interested in this thing, or I'm genuinely concerned, I'm having a deep feeling. And either you don't know, or you do know that she's fucking lying, and she's, she's actually playing fucking 50D chess, and...
It's great. And the thing is,
I feel like such a fucking idiot because I'm like, these two characters specifically, and also a bunch of other characters that are related to Fish Mooney and Penguin. I genuinely fucking love them so much. If the show was nothing but this show would be one of my favorites.
like, it's something we were saying before. It's like the mob stuff. Part of the reason we like it so much is like, it's the mob stuff that hasn't already been perfected by Godfather, with like a splash of superhero nonsense in it. Like, Godfather is an excellent movie, one of the best movies ever made, and it really goes into like the dynamics of a mob family. The mob in this is not about a mob family, not even a tiny bit. It's about a bunch of people who've been thrown into a mob family together who all want to be at the top.
It's basically like world diplomacy in Civilization 1, where there's a bug that if Gandhi adopts democracy, he goes into like crazy warlord mode and tries to nuke everyone. It's
such a thing where it's like you do really feel that tension every time like some player on the board gets knocked down a few pegs, or someone like gets like in with someone else, and
someone's trying to execute this ridiculous plan, or someone turns up in a place you wouldn't expect them to.
It's just wonderful.
But to, I guess, circle back to what we actually
it's about.
Yeah. Edward Nigma, fucking hell.
I know. Like, it's a problem that's consistent in almost all the versions of the Riddler. And the problem with this one is that they've removed any kind of likability while pretending it's still there. Mm-hmm. Like, it's very much we're supposed to feel sorry for him because he's being friend-zoned or mistreated. Friend-zone doesn't exist. And if she says no 5 times in a nice way, I think you should just get the message. Like...
Or if you overhear her smack-talking you with some of her friends, then maybe just give up on it.
Yeah, maybe she is not a very nice person if she talks about you that way. And, like, the Riddler being autistic-coded only serves to, like, muddy the waters about people who may feel uncomfortable about their own diagnosis, about the ways they act. Like, a lot of things that I've seen people say, like, oh, I don't like to sim because it makes me seem crazy, is the kind of thing they'll get Edward to do to try and, like, draw attention to the fact that he's weird and unusual. And it's just like, that stuff's fine.
Can I, because this is something that I've been thinking about recently, and I'm going to get personal for a second. I have started to realize that I may have ADHD. I haven't like looked into getting diagnosed, but I've actually looked into, symptoms and stuff like that. And I do recognize a lot of it. But I started to notice that how in a lot of, crime shows, will have people who are, killers and who are nervous and about to get caught, do that leg shaky thing. Mm-hmm. And I go like, I do that like constantly all the time.
Yeah.
Is that like a creepy behavior?
Like a lot of nervous tick stuff gets written as like nervous behavior, but it's like for a lot of people that's just how you get energy out. Like rocking back and forward is one of the most common stims in the world, and people do it because it's less noticeable.
I'm doing it now, like I'm doing with the shaky leg thing. It just feels good and it gets rid of excess energy. But then you see it like, oh, this is a crazy serial killer, and you can tell they're a crazy serial killer because their leg is twitching.
It's quite a big problem in actual police interrogations as well, because like they will read like abnormal body behavior as a sign of guilt or a sign of like discomfort, when for a lot of people it's just what they do when they're nervous. And you'd be nervous if you were in a police interview for something that you did do or didn't do. You would be nervous.
Yeah.
So it's a really big problem. Like rocking back and forward is one of my stims that I do because it's makes me less self-conscious because it's not as noticeable. But it's still something that people will think of, oh god, that's a crazy person if you rock back and forward with any kind of intensity. And it's such a common thing that's just there to relieve stress, and it's so often turned into they must be evil, and it's like...
Yeah, they're gonna snap and murder someone.
It's a real problem, and Batman exemplifies so many of them. So as autistic representation goes, I think you can say it's a pretty good summary of the issues with so many villains, because there's just dozens of them that are
It's like a case study of this is how bad media portrays disabled people and neurodivergent people in a bad way that is harmful to them.
Yeah, if you wanted to see a version of that, just to see like what those tropes are, because it does hit every single one of them without fail.
Almost like deliberately.
It feels very intentional, though I can't possibly say if it was or not. But it's the kind of thing where it does kind of go through all those key points that you would want to talk about if you wanted to understand, like, okay, I'm writing a villain who, you know, might be on the spectrum, because you can do that. There's a lot of things you should avoid saying, and this is what makes them evil. Like, autistic behavior isn't what makes them evil. You can have an evil character who's autistic, but the fact they're autistic is not what makes them evil.
Yeah.
It's a very nuanced thing, but you do have to make that distinction, because people do get uncomfortable around people with autism, and a lot of it is because they don't understand it, or like that inherent, I don't get it, so I don't trust it. It's
or because they recognize these behaviors from crazy villains in media.
Yeah. And like people will say, well, people can distinguish between life and TV, but like
they can't, first of all.
Yeah,
that's like factually proven that people can't.
People ship real life people, so they can't. That's
also, I mean, the classic example is that the movie Jaws, which is a good movie, don't get me wrong, is definitely 100% led to a bunch of sharks getting needlessly killed.
Yeah, and
because it convinced people that sharks are super dangerous and that we need to eradicate them.
And then there's always the, if you look up any kind of actually autistic review of Rain Man, there's a billion and one things from that movie that people just wish hadn't been brought up, hadn't been put into the public consciousness. Please stop assuming all autistic people have, like, a photographic memory. I don't know why that became so prevalent. It's very tiring.
Because it was in a movie, and movies affect people. And if they've only seen... If they've seen a concept explained only in a fictional movie, that is the only explanation they have, and they will apply that to reality. And anyone who claims otherwise is either, you know, incredibly naive to how the world actually works, or just doesn't want to feel bad for how they stereotype people.
It's like, I try and be very forgiving with that stuff, because it's like, we're all born not knowing anything, you know? Like, I wasn't born knowing what autism was, even when I was born autistic. Like, you will have assumptions and ideas that are wrong, that seem hurtful, that create connections that are mean. But that doesn't make you a bad person. Yeah, it's just being conscious of them, you know?
I'm not saying that, you know, people are bad for getting the wrong idea from this kind of media. I'm saying that anyone who tries to claim that media doesn't affect our view of reality in any way is lying either to themselves or to the person they're talking to.
Yeah, it's a thing. It's why I think it's important to like recognize when these tropes are present in certain characters, because the prevalence of these kind of traits happen way more often in villains than they do in like heroes or in protagonists. You know, it's just something to be aware of, and I think it's a good example. Hopefully, in the future, we will be able to talk about some shows that are actually good quality. We have been watching a few cartoons and stuff with some different ideas of who we can talk about. Like I said, we've got some video games that I'm hoping to check out and be able to talk about at some point soon. The video game one's going to be interesting. I'm not sure how would be best to approach it, to be honest.
I guess, I mean, because this episode is kind of different, because we're not talking about a specific episode of the show we're discussing. So it's more of a free-form thing, which I guess is how we could approach a video game as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really give any promises as to what we'll do next, because all video games are too goddamn long these days. I sound like an old man shaking fist at cloud, but all video games are too long. So if we ever do one, it will be a long time after I start playing it. But I think that's everything. Overall, guilty pleasure quality in terms of watching, and in terms of autistic representation,
Bad.
but in a very teachable way.
Yeah.
Like, it's very by the numbers in the way it fucks up. So if you want to try and be a bit self-aware about how you write characters, probably worth checking out in that way for it, but otherwise, not a good time. Not great on that front. This was Spectrum Projection with your hosts Hannah and Tilda. Our theme music is Summer Longing by Tilda. Send us suggestions for future topics to spectrumprojection@gmail.com or to our Twitter and Facebook pages at SpecProjPodcast. See you soon.
Bye.